Lavinia, welcome to the Mindship podcast. How are we doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me, and I am very curious about the questions and what we'll talk about.
Exactly right. So, I've got to be honest. When I do these podcasts, I do get a bit power crazy, mainly because I don't tell anyone the questions I'm going to ask, and then we just see where it goes. And for some people, that freaks people out, and then some people are like, "Yeah, let's go, let's tango, let's see what happens." So, yeah, it's good that you're nervous. Nervous is good, I think. Or curious. Curious is a better word.
Mhm.
Um, I was thinking we was just chatting before we hit record, and you mentioned that you mentioned me in your first ever no, you're within your first four or
Fourth,
five, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
fourth newsletter, and then since then, my oh my, has the world of Lavinia grown so much with Offbeat,
Mhm.
and I can't wait to get into that with you. Um, but before we get into any of the good stuff, I ask my guests to come up with a log line. What summarizes them? What would your log line be?
It would be because I said curious that I'm curious. I think I'm the curious person that can never decide.
Okay, okay, never decided. Okay, we'll come back to that. We
Mhm.
will come back to that. Um, Before we get into kind of your world, and how where you've come from and where you are right now, I ask my guests to roll the dice, and basically pick a number between 1 and 12. Um, and what that is that links to a list of questions I have here, and I will ask you the question, and then we'll get the answer a little bit later on. So go for it. What number would you go with?
So, should it be one number?
Just
Sorry, or
one number
one
between 1
number?
and 12.
It
Yeah.
should be 8.
8. Ooh, interesting. Interesting fact. 8 is the most picked number when someone gives a number between 1 and 12. 8 is always,
Hmm.
yeah. And because I knew this stat, I put the hardest question as number 8. So, um,
Awesome.
yay. Okay, so the question which I'm going to give you, and we will come back to it in a bit, is, do you even like yourself? Okay. So we'll come back to that in a little bit later on. Um, but yes, Lavinia, I've followed you for a long time now. You're inspiring in what you do. I really appreciate the content you put out there. And even though I'm not in learning anymore, I can see the elements of someone just who works hard and who cares. But maybe for my listeners who maybe haven't come across you and haven't come across kind of Offbeat, maybe tell us about, yeah, a bit of a whistle stop tour of your career, I guess.
Oh my God. So I'm originally from Bucharest, Romania. I actually joined university like many years back, and I think I wasn't very happy with how things looked like in there. Like I couldn't I started studying language and literature, French and Romanian, but I couldn't see myself as a teacher or a translator, which were the two main roles that you could get after the university. Um, and I felt like I was missing something, so I joined an NGO where we started designing career development programs for students. And it was the first time when I saw that learning can be different from what I knew in school. In school, you knew that the teacher had all the information, that you had to be graded to like see how much knowledge you acquired. Everything was very textbook, I would say, and I don't think that I ever fit into that way of learning. And then when we were a bunch of students doing learning for other students, and everything was about community, it was about social learning, it was about expanding our comfort zone immensely, I would say. Like I did sales, and I never could have thought that I can do sales. So I think that was my ramp up to whatever I did afterwards, because my mindset shifted into I need to like what I do, instead of I just need to do this so I'm able to live, which was kind of the mindset that, I think it was the mindset of the country, of the region altogether. So it was quite life changing. And then I still didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I went into marketing, into an agency, and did a bit of digital marketing. But I was like, okay, this is not the right fit. The organization wasn't the right fit either. And then I was lucky enough to stumble upon an employer branding role. So I kind of went into HR, but still did marketing, which was a
Mm.
very good combination. And then after a while, I think I always knew that I will end up in learning, but I never kind of sat and reflected about it. And as I was saying earlier, curiosity like has a downside, or at least I thought it had a downside, that I could never decide what the heck will I do with my life and my career. So I was always exploring. And then finally, I got into learning and I fell in love. And I first started as a L&D consultant for a tech team, a tech and product team, which was a very good combination because I love tech and product and I'm a geek, and I could understand my stakeholders, and it was just wonderful. And doing learning for them was amazing. And very quickly afterwards, I became the leader of the L&D team where I was working, and I grew the team from 4 people to 12 people. And that was another transformation that I had to go through, because I went from being the person that had to do everything to being the person that had to enable others to do the things that they needed to do. So it was a big challenge at first. And then something that I noticed was that as a team, we were missing many of the skills that we needed to deliver the projects, the learning projects, and have positive outcomes for the business. So from that, and my passion for learning, my curiosity, I love research, I started a newsletter that you mentioned, the Offbeat newsletter for L&D professionals. And after, I think it was 2 years, I quit my job. I started doing Offbeat full time, and it turned into this. I still like to call it a product, although it's not a tech product. It's just the mindset that I'm trying to put
Mm.
myself into. It's a product, a learning product for L&D professionals. So this is what I'm doing right now.
Wow. Wow. And I think product is a beautiful way to put it because excuse me. Because when I guess when there's a lot in what you talk about in kind of how probably my world into L&D, certainly my way out of L&D. And it's funny that you used the word kind of curious, because when I got interviewed on my own podcast, my logline was a curious creative chimp. And it's that curiosity, I think, which led me into L&D, but also is the reason it pulled me out. And it's funny, I think, most people don't want to go into learning because they don't actually know it exists into a big
Mhm.
wide world. They don't actually go, I want to be a learning person. They find a way into it because of that curiosity. And I think it's the reason why lots of the best people in learning find a way out, because they go,
Mhm.
actually, there's something more to it.
Mhm.
And I'm listening to you speak now. I'm like, oh, you won't be in learning for long. Like you'll stay in learning for a while, but then I think you're going to go much bigger. But that's my bias, maybe. That's my bias.
Mhm.
Um, go on.
It's a very interesting viewpoint, actually, because I had to shift my identity from being a learning person to being an entrepreneur,
Mm,
and someone who does business development and marketing and everything, to be honest, when you're in a startup. So while I still do learning, I don't think that's all. I think other layers were added to my role, and I completely agree. I think I was led here by curiosity as well.
mm. Well, this is fascinating because when I was prepping for this interview, I was like, actually, I don't want to speak to Lavinia about learning. I want to
Hmm.
speak to her about the fact of the solopreneur, then the entrepreneur,
Mhm.
and then the person who's creating this amazing kind of product and the business. And it was really interesting because I was kind of tossing up what kind of interview could we have here? And I think that's the most inspiring thing what I find with you. Like you have been consistently consistent. Like, and it feels weird to say that, but there's bits of me where I go, oh, I have a podcast, but I'm hit and miss. I'll do a season, but I'll take some time out. But you've been at it constantly, constantly, constantly. And I'm going to get into all that with you because I'd love to kind of squeeze that knowledge out of your head. But before we do, you talked about in Romania.
Mhm.
What's it like in Romania? I've never been, and I imagine some of my guests, yeah, have never been there before. But I guess telling me from a child's point of view. So the reason why I'm asking you this is, if I was to go and ask one of your teachers when you was in Romania, what would you be when you grow up? What do you think your teacher would have said to me?
Doctor, teacher, lawyer, architect, maybe. I would
Okay.
say those were the famous careers in Romania. And
Okay.
I don't think that only here, but usually that's what you would hear. And it was the reason that I never felt that I fit in because I didn't want to do any of those things.
Mm.
And if I would say how it's a beautiful country, it really is a beautiful country. I think the downside is that we're not so good at marketing as a
Okay.
country,
Okay.
but it
Yeah.
is a beautiful country.
Walk me through that. Walk me through the downside of marketing.
You know, you like we are going on holidays in like Italy or whatever, Croatia or the UK or all these places, and we're like, oh my god, like the nature is amazing here, like mountains and forests and the fresh air. And my parents, who are a bit like more old school, they're like, no, we have to go to see our country. So they push me and my partner to go with them on holidays and see Romania. And we go there and we're like, oh my god, it doesn't even feel like we are in our own country. It's so fresh if you go out of the city, and big cities where everything is like populated and very very crowded, but the nature is amazing. What I don't think that we're doing so well is just telling others how, like even telling ourselves, to be honest, how amazing it is. We're not good at sharing stories of different places and attracting either Romanians or people from other countries to our country, which I think it's a big big shame for many reasons. Even from an economic standpoint, and yeah, we're not well known for the things that we could be well known for.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Interesting. It's I know one of my friends is from Romania and they said the same. They was like, it is beautiful, but it's like in one respect it's kind of like, so it's a kind of the worst best kept secret because
Mm.
the people who live there don't realize actually how pretty it is because they don't go out enough to go, oh shit, it
Mhm.
is actually really nice here. And
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
interesting. Okay. And you mentioned right at the start around translator. You mentioned about translator. Where did that come from? And actually, there's a follow up, I guess. Can you speak? Like, how many languages can you actually speak?
Oh my god. So I think again, going a bit back, I couldn't fit in any of those traditional roles that I would hear of, and I I never had the option of exploring like the business world and the different roles and so on. So it wasn't a conscious, intentional decision, the university that I chose. It was only, okay, I like reading. It seems that I like French. I don't speak French, by the, by the way, because you asked. I understand it if I read it, but like with any other language, if you don't practice it, it goes away. But it was I landed onto that university without having a proper intention. And to answer your second question, so I do speak English. Like, it's not perfect, but I have practiced it for the last 3 years almost every day, so it got better in time. I speak, if I like squeeze it out of me, Spanish. I understand it very well, and I had the opportunity to speak last year. I was in Spain, and I was forced into some situations where I had to squeeze it out of me. And yeah, I understand French, but that's it.
I can barely do English. Like, I can barely do English. Most of my friends are like, "Mate, I have no idea what you just said." So, I mean, that's amazing. Um, okay then. So, asking for a friend, me. Um, any tips on how to learn a language? Because obviously, like you said, you can read French, you can do a bit of Spanish, English is bang on. Like, yeah, give me some tips. How would I've always wanted to learn Spanish, for example.
Hmm.
I'm dyslexic and dyspraxic, so reading is like a nightmare. So yeah,
Hmm.
what tips would you give someone who maybe wants to at least get by?
So I don't have the science behind it, but
No.
what I would say is first just surround yourself with that language, even if at first it feels odd, like just hearing it over and over again. And maybe, also understanding a bit the context or where different words come from, that can help, even with the accent and everything. So, English, like for me, English it's not my first language, but I listen to podcasts in English. I haven't read something in Romanian for years now. I'm lucky enough to like be able to read and focus and so on. So for people who can do that, just push yourself to read in that other language. Um, Talk to people. It's very odd because I do think you have to let go of some barriers when you start speaking that language, because you're gonna, well, fall on your head. It's not gonna be good. I have to tell you, it's not gonna be good. And even right now, again, years after doing this every day, I still stumble upon my words. But I think what got me to at least, speaking English decently was that I practiced and I let go of I'm not gonna be good. Like my tenses will be awful. Even now, like I have my colleague, my co-founder. She's an English. She was an English teacher, and she always corrects me. And I'm like, okay, let's get over with it. I got my point across. I think that's important. But all of those things won't be okay. And I think it was the same for me. Like with Spanish, I was, well, you could say lucky enough that I grew up in Romania where telenovelas was a thing. So I grew up with Spanish and I understand it very, very, very well. But when I went there, it was like that barrier was again there. Like, oh my God, I'm gonna make a fool of myself. And like forced by circumstances, I had to speak and everyone was, "Oh, you're okay, you're decent, you can survive." So I think those things, and like with anything in learning, you just have to push yourself a bit to learn it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Pareto principle, right? What's the
Hmm.
20%? What's going to give me the 70% bang for my
Hmm.
buck? If I can learn them, the rest can kind of fall in line eventually.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so we know a little bit about you. I want to needle into your log line a little bit. So you was like curious person, but can never decide. Tell me a little bit about that.
Um, I think it comes with curiosity. I think they are, in the same package. It's just that if I look back in my journey, even the big things were always a struggle for me to say, okay, I want to like do this in life, or I want to do these projects. It was always, but everything seems so cool and so nice and you can learn so much from everything. It's extremely hard to decide. So I think that in that sense I'm still like a child. I'm oh, but we can learn this and we can learn that and we can, and I can never like focus very well. That was a feedback that I got very early on in my career. um and then I think that's okay, like that part of being indecisive, it's okay. But what happens is that I do bring that into like the small things that we do at work, and I got feedback from my co-founder that like we decide on something that it's very small, like do we send this email or not, and I say yes, let's send it, and then I start writing that email and I realize, but is this a good idea? I don't think we should send it. So in general I would say that I'm very hard to work with because of this reason. So it comes with like anything else, with good parts and bad parts.
Mm. I do think I think you're spot on with it. The curiosity being a double-edged sword, right? It's funny in my book, The Insightful Innovator, I talk about it a little bit around. I have to use a tool now called Obsidian. Have you come
Mhm,
across Obsidian?
mhm. No.
So basically, it's like it's a second brain, right? So all the good things, all the big stimulus, and like, ooh, that's exciting and that's cool, and you put it all in here, and what it does is over time, you start to connect patterns what you wouldn't necessarily see.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I have this giant. I can't even share my screen on this to show you, but I have this giant map of randomness. Like it's constantly being expansively curious outside of just where we are. Um, and I think it's your greatest strength, right? Like the curiosity is your greatest strength, but it's also your greatest weakness because we could do this, but look at this over here. It's like where to go. So okay, I know, I get you. Um, so you've been doing what episode, what newsletter did you say you're on now? Was it 174?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so you're on newsletter 174. You have a podcast.
Mhm,
You have the product,
mhm,
which is the cohort.
mhm.
Um, but before we get all there, um, what's what was the thing? What made you want to do a newsletter in the first place? Because to a certain point, I've done it backwards. I did the podcast. I did a little group. Then I did a podcast. Then I did a book, and then I did a newsletter, which is the complete wrong way now on reflection. Ta-da! But what made you do newsletter? Tell me about that kind of journey first.
It's so random.
Okay.
So it's not like I woke up one day and said, I'm gonna do a newsletter. It wasn't like that at all. What happened was so because I'm curious, like I always went on Google and went very, very deep. And I found all these like very cool resources. And I remember it was the first weekend of the pandemic. It was, I think, I don't know, 20 or 12 of March 2020. And everyone was talking about what are we going to do now that we're moving everything online in learning. And I was like, okay, that's cool, it's very good that we're talking about this, but I feel like we're forgetting some very important pieces of L&D that we should take into account when doing that. So I pulled some resources and I posted them on LinkedIn, and that post got a good reaction. I was never on LinkedIn before. That post got a good reaction, and it was like an incentive enough for me to start doing that every Sunday, because that's why I send my newsletter on Sunday. That's not a good idea, by the way, but well. Um, so I posted for a couple of weeks, and then someone said, "Hey, like these resources are really good, and they get lost in my LinkedIn feed. I would really like to receive them in my inbox. Why don't you turn this into a newsletter?"
Mm.
And because I do, like I jump into these things like, oh my god, I'm gonna learn so much. I was okay, and then I think 2 weeks later, on May 14th, 2020, I sent the first issue. So it was not intentional. It was not something that I programmed somehow for myself. It was just like, yeah, the circumstances.
Wow. Wow. And here we are at 174. So it's a fascinating one. I guess the reason why I've gone to a newsletter now is because I want to get my audience off LinkedIn as fast as
Hmm.
possible. I want to deplatform my people as fast as possible. Because LinkedIn's algorithm is a fickle beast. And I did a bit of A/B testing a couple of weeks ago. So I put a post out there, And then I asked my partner to see if they could see that post, and they
Mhm.
couldn't. And I said, well, just go on my profile and see if you can see my post there. And they couldn't. And I was like, this is interesting. So now there's a post out there, but people can see it and some people can't see it. I was like, oh, this doesn't feel right anymore. So that's the reason why I kind of moved. I haven't wrote an article now or anything properly on LinkedIn for a while. But there's a real I have this kind of internal debate, and I'd love to get your ideas on it. So, in one respect, I love social media, and in the other respect, I absolutely hate everything about it. And when I go on LinkedIn now, the one thing I miss on LinkedIn is depth. I
Mhm.
miss depth of conversation. I miss depth of real progressive provocation and thinking. And I can either put it down to one or two things. Either one, everyone's generating their content now using AI, which is why everything's a bit boiled rice and a bit meh. Or it's a fact of everyone's gone, yeah, it's time to deplatform because this isn't working. There's a lot to unpick there. And
Mhm.
so let's go back to the social media kind of good or bad. Where do you sit on it?
Mm, like my first instinct would be bad,
Okay.
and I have a couple of reasons for that. And the first one like has nothing to do with learning necessarily. It just what it does to us as human beings. I actually just read a book, Stolen Focus, which talks a lot about social media and how, because we, like in the past couple of years, we ended up being programmed literally to see like very short form things, and get those likes and whatever other emojis you have on different platforms. So it plays to some core human needs and turns them into something that it's not good for us. Hence, I talk to so many people, and I've experienced it myself, where I am not able to focus and read a book end to end. So it had to, for some reason, I was, and I still am, a big reader, but for a very long time I just stopped reading. And then when I went back to it, I had to train my mind. It was like, stay here, read it, come on, you can do this. So I think from that point of view, it's already really, really bad for us. And focus is so important in so many aspects of our lives. So that's one thing. Then I think social media can be and is very polarizing. I think you will also always like see people arguing over all sorts of social issues and in general over everything. And it just splits us as a community, so I hate
Mm,
it for doing that. And the third reason is because it literally paints, or it made us curate life. Like we're not, I have this app, Be More, or not Be More, Be something. I can't
okay.
remember the name, but the idea is that you can only post one picture a day, and you have like a timing. Like there's no time to like make yourself pretty and all that. You
Nice.
just have to like post that. And their idea was that like Instagram and even LinkedIn, Facebook, and whatever, makes you curate your life, which ends up being very negative for our mental health. And I started reading more and more about how teenagers are affected by that, and how they are more anxious. They like their mental health in general is not very good. Like with teenagers in general, like your mental health is, you're going through all those changes. But it seems like this generation that grew up with social media is even more anxious than those that went before. So Yes, just to finish my argument, like I would tend to say it's bad, but on the other side, I would be like missing the things that social media did do well for me, like building a community. Like I
Mm.
go there for two reasons. On LinkedIn, like that's my go-to platform. I don't usually use anything else, but LinkedIn for me is, I came up with this idea from a conversation and I need to write, and I need to write like right away so I don't forget. And for me, it's just a reflection tool as well. And then connecting with other people like myself, which is not very, very easy. Like, just like you said, like the algorithm screws everything up and it changes so often that it doesn't facilitate community building like I would like to, but
Yeah.
well, it still does something for you.
It's a real catch-22, I think,
Mm-hmm.
because in one respect, we don't like that our attention has been taken away, but then we're creating a product, we're creating a newsletter where it's pulling people's we want people to look, and it's always a bit of a it's kind of a, I always go back and forth because in one way I'm like it's good, and then in the other way I'm like, oh, am I becoming part of the problem? And I
Mm-hmm.
always tend to find I don't know the answer, um, but I tend to bounce between the two, and I think it's it's a dilemma. I think everyone like yourself, content like producers and like creators, you're gonna always find that kind of back and forth. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but there's something which is a real bugbear for me right now, and it's AI content. so so I think you can spot out AI written content an absolute mile off.
Mm-hmm.
I pride myself on none of my stuff being AI written, right? It's me. And that's the reason why I have to do my newsletter bi-weekly because I just can't write. For a dyslexic writing, it's like, so I have to have the time. But then I've seen lots and lots of other people just knock out stuff with AI, and I go, we're creating a bit of an echo chamber now because your AI is writing bland, boiled rice content and it's been amplified, which is then being used to amplify the same content
Mm-hmm.
amplified. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't even worry about this. But when I look on LinkedIn now, I see lots of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What's your take with a whole kind of AI written content? I feel like you've got a lot to say on this one.
It's funny because you can spot those posts. They have so many emojis. Like I use lots of emojis just because I say that I come from the emoji generation, but those posts, what the hell?
Mm,
So yeah, just like a joke. But to your point, I think that AI will always tell you the things that are already out there, and to create like new ideas, you either need to be extremely good at prompting it, which I think we're very far away from,
mm,
or you need to stay in your own head and just stay with those ideas and not use AI. So I think there's a big issue. And I remember I wanted to test ChatGPT and I asked it about learning styles.
mm,
And it told me about learning styles. What it didn't tell me was that they are not scientifically based. So if you don't, as an individual, if you don't have the knowledge, it can feed you with a lot of bullshit.
yeah,
So yeah, the danger is real.
yeah.
I think it's right that you're concerned about it.
Well, I think for me, I was having a conversation recently. I was talking about leadership's bullshit at moment in time. Like, and what I mean by that is it's not bullshit, but people are like, oh, what does a new leadership program look like? I'm like, you're asking the wrong question. The question should be, why do you need a leadership program? It's not what does the best by proxy. If you're doing the kind of best good standards like best practice by
Mhm.
proxy, you're being average because that's what best
Mhm.
practice is. It's the average. So, Mike, the question is you go up the ladder. You ask, why do we need leadership?
Mhm.
What does leadership mean here? And you break it down to first principles and then tackle them. But yet, it feels like that critical thinking is starting to disappear. I think on LinkedIn, and I look at some stuff. I'm like, oh, I really want provocative. I want someone to provoke me. I want to really needle into something really passionate, and I struggle finding it. Today, this morning, I was on morning coffee, chilling out. I was like, oh, let's have a look. And honestly, I must have been there for about 15 to 25 minutes trying to find something interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've tried to manipulate my algorithm as much as I can, follow, unfollow people, and try and feed it. But I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not what it used to be. And then I feel like
Yeah.
a really old person to go, when I was a lad, it used to be really good. So yeah, it's like, I'm like, oh my God, have I turned into my father?
You're old.
I know.
Yeah, well, you know, I think the problem is beyond everything that we would discuss, like critical thinking. That's such a higher up skill, I would say. I think everyone that I've talked to, because there's information overload, because it feels like in the past 3 years, the world went crazy. Like everyone is feeling overwhelmed, everyone is struggling with mental health issues. So I think there are some fundamental problems that lead us to want like short form things, and we are missing that reflection time. We're missing asking those questions to us or to others. I think maybe curiosity is even getting squished because it it feels like everything is there. I think it only feels like it, but that's not actually real. But yeah, I think there are some issues, like with our mental health, how we spend our time, how tired we are, how burned out we are, that lead us to not asking questions, I guess.
Mm. Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's so true. I think it's so true. I think it's a skill which we're losing by the minute. I think it's something. I was chatting to a futurist a couple of days ago, and when I use futurist, I mean an actual real futurist, and not just someone who
Mhm.
changes the title every couple of weeks. Um, and she was saying basically the way the world's going now is the algorithms are going to disappear now. We're getting lazier and lazier. So now we're not wanting to search no more. We're just going to be fed. We're just going to be fed it. And I
Mhm.
think there's a principle, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, where we'll quote the fastest piece of content we can find and we'll make that truth. We won't needle in anymore. We won't research properly. And she used the example of a Substack. She was
Mhm.
like, "This is a prime example of what's happening," and I was just like, "It's fascinating," because on one hand, I'm like, "Okay, that's the human behavior where it's going, and of course, I can make my content smaller and I can make it more lean and I can do this." But actually, when I look at my newsletters, they're always really long, they're
Mhm.
really lengthy, and then and that's by design because it's my way of working out loud in a way. And then I'm just like, if I stop writing out loud, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a skill to writing good content as well,
Mhm.
and I'm probably not the best at that. Um, but I'm like, just because that's what people want, do you go against it and go, no,
Mhm.
but I'm trying to give you something more, and you've lost what that more is. Going back to your analogy of a book, right? You
Mhm.
you stopped reading, and he's like, no, I've got to force myself back into reading and get back into doing it. And I just find it's a real predicament, especially for maybe content, kind of creators who have good ethics, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. It feels like a real conundrum in one respect.
I agree. I can tell you that my challenge is bringing new angles, like especially in L&D, where like we definitely have a historical issue of talking about like very, I don't know, bullshit things. Like
Yeah.
how should we, I don't know, gamify things? Like I have nothing about gamification, but I do think we talk way too much about that in L&D. Like again, about all the things that bring no value to the end user of whatever we're doing. So I I find it very very hard to look at things first, look myself at things from a different angle, and then write things down. So it's not easy at all. But communicating them, once I understood them, like once I feel like I internalized them, communicating them to an audience that, again, maybe is not familiar to whatever the heck I'm saying, I find it easier when I do that in a very simple language. Like just use very, very simple words and stories and examples, lots of examples and visuals as well, just because I do like visuals. I feel like if I put things in a visual, I understand them better. And I do hope people don't stop there. I think that's, the downside, because you can stop looking at a chart and feel like, oh, I got this. But yeah, combining stories, examples with visuals and with very simple, clear language, I think that's the way that I try to do things. And it's not easy coming up with new angles, because, like, having been a curator for the past 3 years, there were so many things that were explored that, again, you need to take yourself outside of the box and looking, like what we're trying to do with the podcast that we have. I said, okay, I don't want to do an L&D podcast because I feel there are so many that are so good out there. Like, why add another one to the world? And, just like
Mm.
you were mentioning, take people's attention for something else. So what we did, and it wasn't my idea, it was the community members' idea, was that, hey, what if we would go and learn the stories of other disciplines? Like, we talk to architects, we talk to chefs, we talk to actors, with like whatever else that's not L&D, and try to get some practices from there. So I feel that actually what's helping me come up with new angles is just looking entirely outside of L&D.
Mm. Spot on, spot on. And for me, I call that extreme worlds. In fact, in the book, I talk about that quite a lot. And this is the reason why I wrote the book, right? The reason why I wrote the book was I was like, it started off as an L&D book many moons ago. I was like, oh no, this is something bigger than L&D. And it was while I was exiting out of there anyway. I was like, actually, no, this feels more into people experience, employee experience. I was like, and actually, when you start looking at the challenges, you need to be creative. You need to look outside. Like, with the whole book, if you could rename a book, it's Look Outside. Like, that would be the title of the book. And the extreme worlds is a great example. I'm like, right, who has this problem? Who are the extremes of who has this problem? And then go
Mm-hmm.
and see how they're tackling that challenge. You'll pull out this kind of stuff. But yet, in one respect, it's good because you create people who look at challenges differently, and then over time you get jaded by L&D, but then they don't fit in another box somewhere. Like, and I was chatting to the futurist, and she was saying, actually, if you're good at what you do, you should be trying to make yourself unemployable, like, because you're challenging the system and you're trying to be something different and progressive, but ultimately it's a sword what you'll fall on as well, because it's a catch-22. So it's a really hard one, and I don't know. I don't know if many kind of content creators and curators have thought about the thing of it's a double-edged sword. It's the thing what gives me life, but it's also the thing what becomes part of the problem. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. Maybe I'm just worrying about a problem what isn't really a problem. I don't know. It could be. But yeah. Tell me about the newsletter then. So I guess walk me through how you kind of create your newsletter first and foremost. Tell me what a day looks like, because you mentioned you do it on a Sunday, right?
No, yes, I send it on a Sunday.
Sunday.
Now I
Okay.
don't create it on a Sunday. That's
Okay.
that improved over time. So I talked to like many L&D professionals during a week, and not all conversations lead to ideas, but I'm happy that still most of them lead to so many ideas.
Mm,
And I like write things down, because my newsletter starts usually with my thoughts. It's just a space for me to reflect upon different issues. So I write those things down, and then I try and like carve some focus time to explore that angle in as many ways as possible. And then it's also a curation newsletter, so I do have a couple. Like, I it's interesting because I used to send so many articles, podcasts, and so on, and then as time went by, I shrinked that side of the newsletter. But I do have some sources that I've been following now for a long time, and I like when things end up in my inbox and I don't have to search for them.
Mm.
So yeah, I just go through whatever I receive in different newsletters from different creators, from different company blogs and so on. And I save things. I have bookmarks for each issue, and I save things. And then again, in that focus time, I try and choose the ones that maybe say something new, which is again very, very hard. Like, after doing this for 3 years, again, everybody talks more or less about the same things.
Yeah.
So I do my best in bringing some new ideas, or new resources. And then I do have a piece that's like a section of the newsletter with resources that are not shared by me, but they're rather shared by the community. So we have this thing called Three to Go, and I usually ask L&D professionals, hey, what were like the 3 resources that inspired you the most up until now, and why? And I put those in the newsletter, and then I pack it, send it, usually get some replies, which is always very exciting because it makes me think more about those things. And yeah, reply to those on a Monday, not on a Sunday. And yeah, I think that's kind of the process.
Wow. Wow. So this is fascinating because, in one respect, you're this kind of person which is curious and can make a decision. And then clearly you're also well organized and very kind of on it,
Mhm.
and disciplined. And I guess, yeah, I remember when I was going on my journey of doing the newsletter, I was like, right, what platform do I use? Do I go Substack? Do I go MailerLite? And I got myself in this web and I was like, holy shit, just write the thing and figure it out as you go. Like, what are you doing, Daniel? Seriously. Like, full on internal debate with myself. Um, but yeah, it's an interesting one. And I think, there's two things probably what I've learned the most from this year so far. It's the podcast. The biggest learning experience I've ever had has
Mhm.
been this podcast. And actually, I'd probably say season 3 is the most stretching because I'm interviewing people like Rory Sutherland and I'm interviewing all these different people which aren't in this
Mhm.
HR and play experience world. And I'm like, oh, this is good, it's stretching.
Mhm.
And a newsletter has been the biggest one as well. Of course, there's a book in there, but the newsletter is the one of like, how do I condense it down? How do I not sound like an absolute maniac? And how do I keep it semi interesting for people?
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think there's a real art to that. There's a real art to that. Um, so you've done newsletter, and then you've got your podcast, which we touched on, but you've got the cohort, right? Like you've got this stuff. Tell me everything about that because that's a big one. That sounds like a big one.
Yes, yes. So what ended up happening after we opened the newsletter was that, like, I opened so many doors for myself. That was the most wonderful thing that happened to me. Like, just people that wanted to talk to me about different things that I was saying in the newsletter. So I met so many people, and I started hearing one very similar issues, no matter if no matter the location, no matter the way of working, no matter the size of the company. In L&D, we tend to talk about the same issues. That was one thing. And the second thing was that some people were trying some things, others were trying other things. And then I started thinking, what if I just put all these people together, facilitate the conversation, and my assumption is that they will start getting ideas for themselves,
Mm,
even when well, more when they engage in the conversation, but even when they observe the conversation. So what I started, it's like a membership, and it has different tiers. The first tier is like very, very basic, and then people can get a mentor. And we found that junior people or people that are in transition tend to need someone to talk to recurrently. And then the third layer are programs. So we do cohorts, just like I mentioned, like very focused on a specific topic, led with like facilitators, really great facilitators that we got to meet and nurture relationships for, with most of them, I would say, for over a year and a half, 2 years now.
Nice.
So that's what we're doing.
Nice. So I guess, and obviously share what you can share and keep to yourself what you can. But yeah, maybe share a bit around. So the kind of programs or whatever, kind of what do they look like? Is it kind of on demand content? What does it look like? I guess I'm thinking for maybe some of my listeners who this might be new to them, like, oh, that sounds like something I want to get involved in. Yeah, maybe
Hmm.
share a little bit about it.
So the programs are usually 6 to 8 weeks. And what's interesting about them, we do have when I say live sessions, like I say over Zoom, not live in
Yeah.
person sessions, but live sessions where, well, they are facilitated by experts, so they have the knowledge, but we call those live sessions sense making sessions. So
Nice.
what actually happens is that learners bring their own challenges, and then first they have each other to bounce ideas off, and then they have this person that they have been through where these people are going through right now. So our facilitators don't usually come with an agenda,
Mm,
but rather they are open to getting to know people and carve each session depending to what learners say they need,
nice.
and in addition to that, like different facilitators wanted to do different things, and we were okay with that. Like some wanted to give like very small assignments, like, hey, do this until next time, or try and do this, and so on. And then they come back with feedback. And again, they, like, every participant can get feedback from their peers as well. So I would say that it's nothing like on demand content, but rather it's this living, breathing thing that gets molded by what people need, not by the what the facilitator knows.
Nice. Nice. I like that. I think um yeah, sense making a big part of my design process. I've called sense making. Um so I'm always gonna have a bias to that word. I'm like, yes, that's nice. But I like the fact of, there's a lot of these courses, I guess, a lot of cohorts where it's like, let me, there's the saying of bullshit baffles brains.
Hmm.
And hey, let me overload you with lots and lots of frameworks and models. And the reality of it is it doesn't help anyone. Where I think what sounds really nice for yours is they come semi with a challenge, right? They come with a challenge
Hmm.
like, actually, this is a bounce and build.
Yeah.
We'll bounce and build it, and we'll come around, and you've got experts in there to do so. I
Hmm.
think that's a really nice thing.
It's not easy, I have to say. Like, not everyone is prepared to get thrown, just like you said, because when you have someone coming in with the content, learning, or what seems to be learning, is quite easy. You just sit there and someone throws information at you, and you might or might not do something with it afterwards. Whereas what we're trying to do is to say, hey, this is your thing, come with your challenges. So by default, it's not just in case, but it's, you have something that you need to work on,
Mm,
you bring it here, and again, you have your peers help, and you have this person or persons help with, as well, which is not that easy if you're used to that passive way
mm,
of doing things. Yeah, it can be feel like you're thrown into the deep end. And but what we hope will achieve is that, just by feeling safe, hey, I don't know how to do things, I have so many questions, I don't know where to start, I don't even know what my problems are. So just by creating this space where it's okay to ask whatever question you have, it's okay to share whatever knowledge and experience you have, and to do that, sometimes it's just about repeating over and over again. Hey, you can do this and ask this and whatever. People will feel more comfortable with this way of doing things.
I love that. I love that. There's something around that kind of signaling right at the start, right? We're here
Mhm.
to let go of our Lego bricks, kind of strong opinions, lightly held. You can kind of be yourself here and ask that question time and time again. There's
Mhm.
something really nice about it, for sure. So what's next then for Offbeat? So to me, you've got world domination, you've got newsletters, you've got podcasts, you've got the courses, the cohort. Sorry, like what's next?
I think it's the first time when I'm gonna say nothing new. I think it took us a long time to just find our way of doing things into all of these, just because we're not the only ones trying to support L&Ds in growing. Like there are so many companies out there, well, not as many maybe with like in tech and product, but there are many in L&D and HR for sure. But it took us a long way to just say, hey, okay, this is how we want to do things. And it might be a bit quirky, it might be a bit different, it might be hard to sell sometimes, but let's just keep trying. And I don't think anything new will happen. It's just going to be how we can improve it. And, because I was mentioning we're looking at it like a product, we do have like, okay, this is the cool thing, this is how we would like it to be at some point.
Mm.
But we're constantly like taking feedback from clients and trying to change sometimes very small things that they seem to be adding more value to whoever chooses to buy from us.
It's fascinating, and I guess again, share what you can and keep to
Mhm.
yourself what you can. But for me, there's a whole dynamic around the kind of pricing strategy, right, for things like
Mhm.
this, and it's funny. I've had a few people message me now going, "You need to do a people experience cohort. You need
Mhm.
to do this." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, no, like, I know it's another thing I've got to do." And then it was like, right, okay, well then I'd have to think about the price, and then I'd have to think about the layout, and then I'd have to think about how do I even build this kind of thing, and where do I host it myself? Do I do it? It feels like it's like.
Mhm.
But then
Mhm.
I always go, but actually, how much would people even want to pay for this? Like,
Mhm.
how did you come up with kind of that whole? This feels like it's a nice one, where versus this might be too high or too low.
So we didn't do it correctly. I have to tell you, like we fucked up a bit.
Okay.
Because the first thing that we did was looking at competitors and seeing how they were pricing their products. Then we were looking at L&D budgets and learning budgets in general, if you have a learning stipend, how big it is, and so on. And I think that was it. And just asking people, I think there's actually a very cool way of asking people how much would it be too low, how much would it be too high, how much would it be fair. And obviously it's important to have as much data as possible to come up with the pricing. But the first thing is that like we did the first mistake of entrepreneurs, take for granted what people are saying.
Yeah.
um Hell, we learned a lot from it. And then um I think the competitors we looked at were way more established than we are, way more established, as well as providing certifications maybe, which is something that we don't want to do. Like I'm
Mm.
against certifications, big time.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to hear your point about that.
Okay.
um but we didn't want to do, we said, hey, it doesn't matter if you get your certification, what's that, it's just a piece of paper, it doesn't say anything. But apparently people put a price on it,
Mm.
so I would say that we're still figuring out pricing, but we learned tons from what we did so far.
Yes, and I guess the reason why I said that is when I when I had Vendela, the startup,
Mm-hmm.
we went through something similar coming up with the pricing for there. The pricing for a one-person band, a small to medium business, and then a giant business. And I remember it was like, do we want to do monthly? Do we want to do yearly? And actually, who does this? And we had some really shady competition pretending to be customers and to find out how the platform worked and then try to build it. I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for shady, horrible naughtiness. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a small mindset because for me, the more the pie gets bigger, the pie doesn't get smaller, right? So like if you're doing something on L&D, for example, and I'm doing something over here on people experience and innovation, which is me, there's a crossover and I can promote
Mm-hmm.
people to you, you can promote,
Mm-hmm.
and the pie gets bigger. It doesn't get smaller.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I still feel like some people struggle with that. They don't see it as that. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, the pricing one, and like you say, what people said versus what people do is a fascinating one. I think when we did Vendela, I think we might have done over 500 hours of user research, which was a lot to find out pricing. And even then, like you was just like, does this work? And
Mm-hmm.
it was like, let's run the experiments and find out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Going back to certificates. Okay, so this is an interesting one. Yeah, I think certificates are a waste of time. But I'm about to move to Dubai, and it's fascinating. So in Dubai, for example, they're big on certificates. They're big on qualifications. So they want to see all your certificates.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've worked for some of the best companies in the world, right? I've done some really good, cool, innovative stuff. Like, yeah, but we still need this piece of paper from when you was in high school. I'm like, holy shit, are you joking? Like, what do you want to see? My swimming badges from when I was 13? Like, what do you need? So I think this is a new reflection for me as well. Now, this is a few weeks aha moment. So do I think they're great? No, but they mean nothing. Like, hey, I'll write one out now. Danny's certificate means nothing. But then it's contextual to where I'm going. In Dubai, they're a big thing. So that's probably been a bit of an evolution for me. I've always been whatever certificates, but now that I think about it, like for Dubai, they kind of won it. So I'm going back and forth on that one as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's an interesting one. It's an interesting one. But I guess what's been your kind of biggest learning on all this? Because for me, you're impressive to me. Like for me, I'm like, wow, so much I can probably learn from you on how to grow my newsletter, how to create my cohort or whatever. Because that was all new to me. But what's been your biggest learning from all of it?
It has nothing to do with learning. It has nothing to do with Offbeat. It everything like my biggest learning is about myself,
Okay.
and I think I don't know if there's probably a term around this, but doing what you love, it's a curse sometimes.
Hmm.
And I didn't feel like I was pushing myself. I think that was the problem. It was, oh, but I love what I do, and I actually love what I do. And like even with the bad parts, because it comes like entrepreneurship in general, it comes with lots of shitty things, but I still loved it. So I think the first year, which was last year actually, after I quit my job, I tended to exaggerate a lot with the hours that I was putting in, not having much of a life. And it took a toll on me when, like, in December of last year. And it was like, oh, I just need to rest. Like, I usually take 2 weeks off, even from the newsletter on like Christmas and New Year's. And it was like, okay, I'm gonna take this like 1 week and a half or whatever, and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna be like putting it all in again. And then I came back. I remember it was 8 a.m. in the morning. It was the 2nd of January of this year. And I was in a cafe and I couldn't focus. Like my brain was fried 100%. And it took me months to recover from that state. And it came with so many other things, like being open to talk about these things and being open to sharing what a failure I was feeling like. And yeah, really, really dark things. So my lesson learned is that as much as you love what you do, and as much of an entrepreneur that you are, you do need to take a step back sometimes and just take care of yourself in other ways. And that's counter to everything that I've learned about entrepreneurship. And I usually say it depends on how you are as a person. Some people can, do more of that, just do it day in and day out. Some people less. Apparently, I thought of myself as, I can work 16, 17 hours a day and be okay. And it turned out that it's not the case.
Interesting. It's yeah, yeah, that's a lot, right? That's a lot. And I think people don't see this because when you make the jump from full-time work to going it alone, you always work like you it's like once you start to produce I speak to a lot of content. I speak to a lot of people, even though I'm not in L&D anymore. I tend to have more conversations with people in L&D going, do you do coaching? Can you do this? Can you do that? And one of them was talking about wanting to go it alone. And I was like, you've got to understand, once you start producing content, paid content, you've always got to produce paid content. Like you've always got to do it at that point because that is a job. It's tough, and I'm in that kind of whole, that solopreneur entrepreneur thing. Like I'm still not. I'm still 1 foot in full time work and doing this on the side. So it's like big respect for people like yourself who kind of go for it and jump for it because I think there's something like you say there around having that support network around you. And having that person who will say, "You're working too hard, stop,"
Mhm.
which is really hard because, like you say, when you love it, you love it. It's a gamble.
It's interesting because I did have those people that were telling me, hey, this is not normal. Like, it's not normal. And I couldn't say it myself. For me, it was, yeah, but I love it. Like, I love it. I know, or first, that I love it. And second, I know this is what I heard about entrepreneurs who made it. I heard they were working 23 hours a day. They were sleeping for 1 hour and only drinking water, you know, and all of that shit, I would say right now, at least for myself. And I couldn't see it. Like, it had to happen to me for
Mm.
me to be able to get out of it.
Yes, yes. Um, you just reminded me of a memory from Vendela when I had Vendela. I had a great co-founder, right? Like similar to you, got that you co-founder, and he's called Sam. Awesome guy, awesome guy, and he was really kind of diligent with his time. He was on and then he was off, and he was very clearly on and very clearly off with his time. And I wasn't, right? I was the same. And I remember being up at 1 o'clock in the morning doing something which was like a tiny thing. I'm like, why the hell am I even up at this time? And I remember we had a conversation and he was kind of like, it can wait till tomorrow. Like, no one's gonna die if you don't look at this little thing on the platform or look at this little
Mhm.
data point or whatever. Um, but yeah, you're right. Like even when you do have that kind of support mechanism around you and them support, it's still hard to break that bubble, right? What was the thing who or what was the thing that made you go, oh, like what was it? Was there one specific moment? Like you say you're using the caff and like you couldn't
Mhm.
focus. But was there a moment before that where, someone really important was kind of telling you, look, this is not, or was it just
No, no. Um, Fortunately or unfortunately, I have a partner who's also very passionate about what they were doing. So I think when you live in a house that where this is the normal, it's
mm,
very hard to see each other and say, hey, you're not doing it. Like
yeah.
yeah, it doesn't, or at least it didn't happen for us. And then I was alone back then. Like my co-founder started later on full time. Um, and while she's very similar to what you were saying about sound, like she's extremely diligent and very passionate about every task that she has. But when she's off. Well, she's still like, even myself right now, I'm still thinking about Offbeat and so on, but I do have moments where I completely disconnect. So she wasn't with me at that time. I wasn't necessarily in like entrepreneurship communities or solopreneurship communities. And even if you are in those, you see a lot of, the struggle, the people putting the time in. So yeah, I can't say that I had someone necessarily. It was just the fact that i I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't get up, in the morning. I lost that. So I said, okay, I need to make some changes. I've been going to therapy like for almost 7 years now. Even that didn't help, I have to say. You have to hit your head, you know, um, and go back and back and back again. But once I realized that, hey, this is wrong, I just went back and started working on myself again.
Mm. I think therapy's got a bit of a weird. It's getting better. It's getting better. But people, I think it's a bit like dyslexia, I guess, in some respects. Some people are really proud of it. Me, I talk really openly about it. And 90% of the time, like, if you read this and you can spot where I've put a full stop or not, this whole writing is wasted on you because you're going to miss a message anyway.
Hmm.
Um, and I think therapy is a little bit like that. On the fact that some people like to talk about it and are open about it and the value it brings, and some people like to keep it hush hush and like it's for them. Both's fine. Um,
Hmm.
but I think therapy is great because it's an independent pair of ears. Like whenever I strip it right back, it's good. It's good questioning. It's good listening. And it's just something where I'm like, every single company should do this for its people. I know it's a hard one. It's a scale problem and whatever else, but it just feels like there's real value there. There's real value
Hmm.
there for sure. Like you've talked about, it's helped you in like whatever you've been there for, like doing it for what 7 years or something. Um, and yet it's still 50-50. Some people want it. Some people think it's something they shouldn't have. It's just it's a weird one. It's a weird one.
Yeah, I think you can't force anybody into therapy. That's for sure. It's just, for me, sometimes it's just a time when it's about myself.
Yeah,
Sometimes I need that.
yeah.
Like, I need to go there, I need to vent, or I need to cry, or I need to laugh, and I need to talk about myself. And yeah, someone will guide me in doing that in a, impactful way. Not just my friends can do that as well, but they will vent with me. They will, they won't help a lot. Yeah, in turning all of that energy into something useful. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I think we're still in between generations. I don't know how it is in other countries, but here in Romania and in Southeastern Europe in general, it wasn't a thing at all. I even remember like 6 years ago when I started going, it was still like, I always openly talked about it. I have no problem in sharing that I do that. But people still couldn't understand why I was doing it. And yeah, I feel like we're talking more and more about it. But again, it's hard to force anyone into it. It's just, you need to be ready.
Yeah, it's a bit like behavior change, right? Like you have to be ready for it first and foremost, else it's just an uphill battle. Um, okay, so based on that, then I've got a couple more questions because I won't be mindful of your time. Um, what's the one thing What's the one thing you don't get to shout about often? What's that one thing?
To shout about?
Yeah, like what's the thing what you're really proud of, or something what you kind of you love, but you don't get to shout about it often.
Can it be anything?
Anything, absolutely anything.
Oh my god. My passion for Formula One.
Go on, explain this. For
So um I find it fascinating the level of performance that those teams need to bring into the game to be the best, and the intentional care that needs to be put into culture, team development, as well as the psychological pressure everyone deals with on a almost weekly basis. So for me, all of that is fascinating. I still have no ideas after years of watching it. How the hell does one, you know, have a don't finish a race, in one weekend because of themselves, of it's their fault or a mechanical failure, and then next week they need to be okay. I'm okay. I got over that. I need to be 100% in this race and do my best. I can't I can fathom that. So yeah, I unfortunately don't have the space to talk about that that much.
And where does that love come from? Is that something you've always had, or is that like a new thing? Or
um I've had it for a while, and I think again it's just the fascination, it's the mystery behind how everything works. I never got a chance to talk to someone that does different parts of whatever a Formula One team needs to do, and it's just a fascination with the performance level that they need to put in and day out. And again, I do think at least drivers' brains are wired in certain ways, like for competition, for just recovering very quickly from being disappointed with themselves or others or whatever. So I think it's right now it's still a fascination, and I feel like there's so much that I can learn both as an individual, as a L&D professional, as an entrepreneur, and then just geek out about how the hell those cars are built and learn something new. So yeah.
love it, love it, love it, love it. Okay, we're coming to the end, and I guess I've got two more questions. I asked you right at the start to pick a dice number, and the question you picked was number 8. And the question was, do you even like yourself?
I actively work to get there.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
I think it's a journey. I've had, and I still have my lows, very lows, I have to say. I also think that being an entrepreneur feeds into the narrative that you're not good enough. I was talking to someone, and she said something that stuck with me. Like every day shows you another angle of how incompetent you are, or softer, like to put it softer, it's just like you discover that there's another thing that you don't know how to do,
Mm,
another thing that you're not good enough at. So I think it can do a lot of harm if you, or at least it could have done a lot of harm if I wouldn't have actively worked on myself. And from all sorts of angles, just feeling better with who I was.
nice, nice. Where can my listeners find out a little bit more about you? Where can they subscribe to the newsletter? Where can they get involved in everything Offbeat?
So I am on LinkedIn. I'm still there. I'm still trying. So they can follow me there. Or our website is offbeat.works, which is a very weird website, but well, it is what it is.
Awesome. I will put all them in the show notes. Yeah, Lavinia, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I couldn't see how like time went by. So thank you. It was really nice.